Have you ever noticed how some people cling to their pain like a familiar blanket? How they return to old wounds like a tongue probing a missing tooth? How they recreate the same dramas, the same heartbreaks, as if suffering were a script they couldn't stop performing? What if I told you this isn't weakness? It's not even habit. It's something far deeper, far darker. Something Nietzsche called the will to nothingness. The unconscious addiction to suffering because it feels more real than the terrifying freedom of joy. Imagine this. You've been handed a cup of poison and you drink it every day. Not because you want to die, but because the bitterness is the only flavor you trust. Sweetness feels like a lie. Happiness feels like a distraction from the raw, aching truth of existence. And so you choose the pain you know over the joy you can't believe in. Why? Because suffering makes sense. It confirms your deepest belief. That life is hard, that love is loss, that you are unworthy. And in a twisted way, that confirmation feels like power. Nietzsche saw this in the religious, the moralists, the martyrs. Those who turned suffering into a virtue, who wore their pain like a crown and called it holiness. But he also saw it in the modern soul, the one who says, "I'm just being realistic," the one who sabotages love before it can leave, the one who thrives on chaos because peace feels like boredom. This is not realism. This is addiction, an addiction to the familiar ache, the predictable sting. Because in a world of uncertainty, suffering is the one thing you can control. But here's the question that cracks everything open. What if your suffering isn't your truth? What if it's just your habit? What if the stories you've told yourself, "I'm broken, I'm unlucky, I'm doomed to repeat the past," are not revelations, but prisons? Nietzsche called it the spirit of gravity, the weight we carry not because we must, but because we've forgotten how to put it down. And the moment you question it, the moment you dare to ask, "Why do I keep choosing this?" that's when the game changes. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who carried a boulder up a mountain every day. He groaned under its weight, cursed the sky, but never once asked, "Why am I doing this?" One day, a traveler watched him and said, "You know, you could just stop." The man laughed bitterly. "Without the boulder, who am I?" And there it is, the heart of the addiction. We don't suffer because we have to. We suffer because we don't know who we'd be without it. So I ask you now, what's your boulder? Is it the relationship that drains you, the job that crushes you, the past you can't release? And more importantly, what are you afraid will happen if you finally drop it? Will you float away, or will you finally meet yourself, unburdened in the terrifying light of freedom? Nietzsche's answer was simple. You must become who you are. But first, you must stop being who you're not. This is just the beginning, because we haven't even touched the shadow that feeds this cycle, the hidden why behind the pain you can't quit. And that's where we're going next, into the depths of what Nietzsche called the eternal recurrence, the idea that you'd relive your life, every joy, every agony, infinitely. And the question it forces you to face: is your suffering worth repeating? Like and subscribe if you're ready to go deeper, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about your own pain. What if I told you that every moment of your life, every heartbreak, every betrayal, every night you spent sobbing into your hands would happen again, and again, and again, not as punishment, but as choice? Nietzsche's most terrifying thought experiment wasn't about hell. It was about willing. Would you curse the universe for your pain? Or would you look it in the eye and say, "Again, please"? Think of the last time you suffered, really suffered. Not the minor annoyances, but the kind that hollowed you out. Now imagine living it eternally. Does the thought make you recoil? Good. That means you already know the truth. Some of your suffering was necessary, and some was self-betrayal. The difference lies in one question: did it deepen you or diminish you? There's a kind of pain that carves you into something wiser, stronger, like a forest after a fire where new growth rises from the ashes. And then there's the pain that's just recycling. The same old wounds, the same old stories, like a needle stuck on a record. The first is inevitable, the second is addiction, and the line between them is awareness. So let me ask you directly, which of your sufferings would you willingly relive? The nights you spent writing poetry after a heartbreak, the failures that forced you to reinvent yourself, or the ones where you played the victim in a story you could have rewritten? Be honest, because Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't about fate, it's about ownership. It's the mirror that shows you which pains were sacred and which were just excuses to stay small. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want to heal because healing means stepping into the unknown. It means trading the devil you know, misery, for the God you don't, joy. And joy is terrifying. It asks everything of you. It demands you show up, fully alive, with no armor. No wonder we cling to suffering. It's the armor we've welded to our skin. But what if I told you there's a way to suffer differently? Not to avoid it, that's impossible, but to alchemize it. Nietzsche called it amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, but fierce, creative partnership with life. It's the artist who turns their grief into a masterpiece, the warrior who uses their scars as a map, the lover who says, "Yes, I've been broken, and that's why I know how to mend." This is where most people stop, because the next step is too radical. It requires you to want your life, all of it, enough to stop hiding behind the easy story of "I'm damaged." Are you ready for that? Or is there still a part of you that clings to the boulder, whispering, "Without this, who am I?" We're just scratching the surface, because the real question isn't why you suffer, it's who you become because of it. And that's where Nietzsche's most dangerous idea comes in. The Übermensch, the one who creates meaning out of suffering rather than being crushed by it. But that's for the next part. Stay with me, because what comes next will show you how to turn your pain into power, not in theory, but in practice. What if your suffering isn't a chain, but a chisel? Nietzsche's Übermensch isn't some superhuman fantasy. It's the person who stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "What now?" The one who looks at their wounds and says, "These are not my end. They're my raw materials." But here's what no one tells you. You can't skip the anger, the no, the furious rejection of the old story. Before you can create, you must destroy. Destroy the identity of the wounded one. Destroy the comfort of resentment. Destroy the lie that your pain defines you. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's spiritual war. And the first battlefield is your own mind. Let me ask you, what's the story you've been telling about your suffering? I'm unlovable because... I'm doomed because... I'll never because... Now imagine taking that story and setting it on fire. What's left? Just you. Naked, unedited, free. Terrifying, isn't it? That's why most people never do it. They'd rather cling to the pain than face the vast, uncharted territory of their own potential. But you're still here, which means part of you is ready. Ready to trade the addiction to suffering for the addiction to becoming. And that's where the real work begins. Like and subscribe if you're ready to go deeper into the fire, because in the next part, we'll confront the shadow that keeps you hooked on pain, the one you've been refusing to see. There's a reason you keep returning to the same suffering, a reason deeper than habit, deeper than conditioning. It lives in the shadow, where you've buried the truth you don't want to face. You are afraid of what happens when the pain stops. Think about it. What would your life look like if you weren't carrying that old hurt? If you weren't defined by that betrayal, that failure, that loss? Who would you be without your wounds? For many, that question is more terrifying than the pain itself. Because if you're not the wounded one, the victim, the one who was wronged, then you have to take responsibility. Not just for your past, but for your now, for the life you're choosing to live. Nietzsche warned us, beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. But what if the real monster isn't the pain you've endured? It's the identity you've built around it, the stories you repeat, the excuses you cling to, the ways you sabotage joy because suffering feels more real? Let me ask you this. What do you lose if you heal? Do you lose the right to your anger, the sympathy of others, the comfort of knowing exactly how your story ends, in disappointment, in heartbreak, in struggle? Because if so, then your addiction to suffering isn't just a habit, it's a bargain, a deal you've made with the devil you know. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not the sum of your worst moments. You are the will that keeps going anyway. The voice that still whispers, there has to be more than this. The presence that refuses to fully surrender to despair.